This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who, at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. As I said earlier in the week, the beat goes on. The post-election aftermath, the massive fraud that was committed on the American people, that is on the verge of installing the brain-dead Joe Biden and the evil witch Kamala Harris as president and vice president of the United States. Yes, there was massive fraud, but no, the courts will not step in to do anything. And you just need to read my book. It takes a revolution. Forget the scandal industry at Amazon.com to confirm that. But I'll tell you something honestly. The president's legal team, the team that doesn't seem to be able to shoot straight, that's lost virtually every challenge so far, and I'm not even blaming them for that, because given the judges that are out there, the federal judges and the state judges, establishment hacks that have no sense of courage or able to put anything courageous into effect, have dismissed virtually every action. And you can expect the same thing if they try to get to the Supreme Court. But you see, they're not doing themselves any favors right now either. Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani seem to have become infected with their own sense of self-aggrandizement. They go out and they do press conferences, but they don't cough up any evidence. And they say, oh, well, they can't do that because people will be retaliated against. We're going to present it in court. Well, you know, time is short right now, not just in the courts, not just with regard to the certification of elections or the Electoral College, which will put Biden and Kamala Harris in place. But time is short generally in the court of public opinion because the tide is turning against the president. And of course, the establishment Republicans who always wanted Trump gone are now happy to stab him in the back, just like Brutus. And not just Mitt Romney, but others as well. And those that claim to be of help really are just feigning it because they don't want to defend the base. But what Powell and Giuliani seem to be doing right now is to be running a fundraising scam to some extent. Because unless they come up with the goods, unless they show it to the American people, and again, they can redact, they can blot out names of people that they have affidavits, and there should be evidence with regard to, you know, these companies that claim to have been hacked or have hacked our system from Venezuela and elsewhere. They need to come forward to the American people to say what they've got. But if they don't, what can one conclude? The 20 emails a day asking for money is a fundraising scam. Because right now, unless we see the goods, as they said in Jerry Maguire, show me the money, show me what it's all about, the American people are going to be ready to throw the towel in. And even Tucker Carlson, you know, Tucker is two-faced, okay? I've dealt with him for many, many years. During the Clinton years, when he used to do Crossfire, when he was a host, he would go after me for suing the Clintons. This is someone who claims he's a conservative. Tucker's no conservative. But to be able to go after Sidney Powell the way he did last night, frankly, it was justified. And she's got to come up with the evidence, and Giuliani's got to come up with the evidence right now. So that's the test. And here's the problem, too. The longer this thing goes on, the more the Democrats are going to use it. In Georgia, where there's also massive fraud taking place as we speak. Over 600,000 paper ballots have already gone out. The two Republican senators are likely to lose because of the huge public relations mess that's being created by the left-wing media and other media, including Fox News, that has become a Judas that has thrown the president under the bus. And if the Republicans lose the Senate, even though, frankly, I don't give much weight to what goes on Capitol Hill. I give little because they're a bunch of clowns, court jesters, and criminals as far as I'm concerned. Read my book, read my lips. It takes a scandal. It takes a revolution. Forget the scandal industry. Maybe it does take a scandal to get people to see what's going on. You can buy it at Amazon.com. The fact is this country's headed down the drain, and it's going to be headed even faster if even the establishment Republicans can't block socialist legislation that's going to be put forward by the likes of Kamala Harris and others in the evil Democrat Party. So that's what's on the horizon. And I want you to read my column this week in worldnetdaily.com. It's going to be up at freedomwatchusa.org. It really talks about how we are living through a period that Ayn Rand predicted. And I've said this before in various radio shows in her book, Atlas Shrugged. When the so-called government that had broken away from the people, a socialist, if not communist government, attempted to dumb down everything in society, to squeeze out personal initiative and freedom, where everyone was so-called equal, where everyone, in effect, was an affirmative action baby, in a way, never expected to achieve, where the country was a bunch of zombies, of equanimity, of people who thought they were equal, but in fact, everybody was less than equal. And one person by the name of John Galt led a revolt. He left society with the intellectuals, with the scientists, with the lawyers, with the few decent judges there were, with others in society, waiting for the society to collapse so they could come back and reclaim the vision of our founding fathers. This book was written in 1957, which was when it was thought that communism was on the rise. Well, you know what? It was not on the rise as much as it's on the rise today. And we're on the verge of that. And I'm going to have later on in this show a very young but brave and very intelligent person from Poland, Ivan Belostenko, who works for Against the Tide TV. He's an investigative reporter, is going to tell you the evolution of Poland, and what they went through in throwing off communism and how it stayed with a deep state. And that's going to be our challenge when we wage the second American Revolution, peacefully and legally. The masses rose up in Poland. They got the Soviet Union to leave, but the communist deep state remained. And that's why we need citizens' grand juries, as I propose in my book. It's why we need to bring about justice. It's why we need to indict, try, convict, and throw in the slammer people who are subverting our Constitution, our rule of law, and our nation. And read my book. We have the legal right to do that. And I'm suggesting we do it peacefully and legally, not violently. But unless we do it as our founding fathers did it, as they set forth in the Declaration of Independence, of course, they had to resort to violence. I don't think we're going to have to. We can do it by other means. And we need to educate the American people. We need to bring them back to a sense of ethics and morality, a sense of right and wrong, a sense of personal initiative. In states like California, if you can believe this, the university system teaches that you can't say, if you're a professor, that we're a land of opportunity, make people feel bad. Well, that's Atlas Shrugged in a nutshell. So I urge you not just to go out and read my book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry, which you can get at Amazon.com and all major booksellers, but also read Atlas Shrugged. See what the prophecy of Ayn Rand was. Read the Declaration of Independence. Realize that we are on the verge of being taken over by socialists and communists, radicals of all stripes, colors, creeds, people who wish us no good will, who want to basically dismantle the country, take care of its wealth, remove its wealth, spend it, and then leave it in a trash heap. And that's unfortunately where we are today. So that's why I can't say it enough, is that we, the American people, have our fate in our own hands. God is indeed with us, as he was with our founding fathers. Read my column this weekend in worldnetdaily.com that you can find at freedomwatchusa.org. Listen to my podcast this morning, which you can find on Freedom Watch TV. Take this to heart. God has destroyed many civilizations. He destroyed the temple. He destroyed the high priests, the Jewish high priests that were money changers. He destroyed the Romans. He destroyed everything that he had to destroy, and he started over many times over. And he is on the verge of doing it again unless we pull ourselves out of this nosedive. And yes, we are in a nosedive. And President Trump was never our political messiah. He did good things for 4 years. We thank him for what he did. But it's time for we, the people, now to take charge. He will not succeed in this election challenge, mark my words. And he will not fade from history because we thank him for what he did. And we must follow on in his vision and in the vision of our founding fathers and the vision of God, the Savior, his Son. But we have to know that we're moving forward. And what's going on right now is an exercise in futility. And that's borne out by the fact that Sidney Powell and Giuliani could not come up with one piece of evidence. I'm sorry. So this is where we are today. And this is why I want you to go to freedomwatchusa.org, join our Justice League. We are fighting for you. You are the superheroes. You are the people who will save the country, not the politicians, not the judges, not the lawyers. I can only tell you after 43 years, the legal profession is the most corrupt profession in this country, even more corrupt than prostitution, as Mark Twain said, well, you know, the difference between politicians and lawyers and prostitutes is that prostitutes actually perform a service. Well, you know what? Our government people and our legal profession perform a service. The service is the destruction of this country. So that's where we are today. I'll be right back. The next segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Until then, go to our website, purchase the book, It Takes a Revolution, roll up your sleeves, and let's get to work.
Fearless.
He's claiming he's crazy, he's racist, he's out to kill the Democrats.
Dangerous.
He don't care, he uses the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad,
Special Prosecutor
very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Among the various things that we need to do, other than reclaiming the country and taking control peacefully and legally, is to clean up our legal system, which is a cesspool. The judges that we have on the federal bench in particular today, and many in the state courts, were bought and paid for with political campaign contributions from large law firms, corporations, labor unions, and others. They are just like the yes men who were on the court of St. James of King George III. And when the king took our legal system back to London, that was the final straw which caused the founding fathers and the colonies to revolt, to form a new nation. Now, I've got some cases going through the courts right now. There's a couple good judges that are out there. There aren't many. And I'm hopeful that we'll get some action. I have a case that I brought in my personal capacity against Joe Biden down there in Palm Beach, Florida, where Biden interfered with Freedom Watch's YouTube because I said we were going to conduct a citizens grand jury and indict him and his son to hold them legally accountable. Our citizens grand juries will be going forward. We will be seeking the indictment, not just of Robert Mueller, which we got last fall, and we're going to try him once COVID subsides. And I'm confident we will convict him for what he did with my client, Dr. Jerome Corsi, threatening him to lie or indicting him and putting him away for life. We have cases against the social media companies. We now know a whistleblower came forward last week that there is collusion. There is antitrust, anti-competitive conduct by social media. They actually communicate with each other, YouTube, Google, Twitter, Instagram, the rest, and decide what they're going to censor, what they're going to take off of their network. Did you see Jack Dorsey, the head of Twitter, last week? He looks like the prodigal son of Charles Manson and Osama bin Laden with a nose ring. I mean, these are the people that are in control. These are the people who invented the mass surveillance that the NSA and others use to keep us down and to terrorize the populace. And it's not just the social media companies. is that Fox News, we now know, has sold out conservatives, libertarians, people of faith. And we see Newsmax trying to come forward and saying, oh, well, we're the successor to Fox News. Well, let me tell you about Newsmax. Newsmax, I used to write a blog for Newsmax. 80% of my blogs, of my columns, could not be published. They were censored because it was too conservative for Newsmax. Who runs Newsmax? Chris Ruddy, who at one time I thought was my friend, someone who pretended to be a conservative, but later gave $1 million to the Clinton Foundation. That's not a network that you want to spend your time watching. Besides, you can't even see much of it because the picture's so bad on DirecTV and other places. We need new media, and that's why I thank Radio America for allowing me to tell the truth as I see it. I do that almost every day. I thank them. And we need those out there, those other radio talk show hosts and others, to get the word out, to get the clarion call out. And I hope the president on January 20th will go off and purchase a cable network. Let him purchase Fox News and throw Ruddy out and let him do his thing. That's the best thing he could be doing right now, is to start a way that we can communicate en masse to the American people. Because Fox News is dead, except for a few commentators on Fox News, like, and it's Fox Business actually, like Maria Bartiromo, who challenged Andy Biggs this week, Congressman Andy Biggs, and said, what did you Republicans do? You knew this fraud was coming. You sat there and you did nothing. And then Biggs said, you know, you're right, Maria. We need a network that's going to stand up for the American people, that can communicate with the American people, that doesn't play both sides of the street like Fox News and Newsmax. And perhaps the president can do that for the next 4 years. And he can also run again for presidency in 4 years. But I suggest something else. I think the American people, we have a right, listen to our Constitution, to form a new government peacefully and legally. We could even nominate him to be president or nominate somebody else. We can have cabinet officials in waiting. We can do it peacefully, and we have a mandate to do it. That's our Declaration of Independence. So let's take our government, a real government, back to Philadelphia where it all began. Let's put it in Independence Hall, where they had the Continental Congress, where they had the Supreme Court, where they had our government at the time. And let's start anew. I want you to think about that, because it can be done and it was done. And we want to do it peacefully and legally. I'm going to be right back with Ivan Belostenko. Listen to what he says about what happened in Poland, because it's a roadmap for what can happen here and the risks of not doing it the right way. I'll be right back.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I'm back with Ivan Belostenko, an investigative journalist and reporter, a very brave individual who I've come to know over the last many months, with Against the Tide TV in Poland. Now, notwithstanding the fact that Ivan's a very fine person, he's a Christian, and he's someone who believes in freedom, I wanted him to come on the show. He's a young guy, to talk about what happened in Poland, how the Soviet Union was pushed out of Poland, and what happened after that. Because what I'm saying here is that we can wage in this country a peaceful and legal revolution. We don't have to fire a shot. In the early days of solidarity in Poland, in the early days in the shipyards and elsewhere, with the help of the Catholic Church, which at that time, had good intentions, at least in terms of Poland and Pope John Paul II, people rose up in mass, hugely in mass. And it reminds me of what Jefferson said, the famous quote, when the people fear the government, there's tyranny, but when the government fears the people, there's liberty. We are at the point that we have to do the same thing right now here in this country because we have no government. I've written a column. It'll be on worldnetdaily.com this Friday and over the weekend. And it talks about how the country is being taken down to ground zero, almost like Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, where John Galt left with industrialists, artists, scientists, doctors, the learned society, people that built the country, exited stage right, as we would say, and waited for the left to destroy the country, socializing it, communizing it, and then they would return and then reestablish the vision of our founding fathers. And in this book, Atlas Shrugged, which was written in 1957, when communism was thought to be rising in this country, of course, now it actually has risen as it's rising throughout the world yet again. And Ivan will talk to that about that. It was thought that this was going to be a real threat. And Ayn Rand saw the future, and the future is now with us. So what I'm saying in my book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry, is that we can rise up. We can use peaceful and legal means, citizens' grand juries to bring the criminals in government and on the courts accountable. And the American people can rise up in mass, and we can show the government it's time for them to leave, both the Democrats and the Republicans who have succeeded in destroying this country. And even the Republicans, they're the ones that want to get rid of Trump too, the establishment Republicans. They didn't like it, that he surmounted them, that he went above them, that he went to the people. They don't want you to go to the people. They want to continue to enrich themselves at our expense in Washington, D.C., throughout state capitals, and with their yes men on the courts, make sure that they cement their hold on power. We're on the verge of becoming a socialist, if not communist country. President will not prevail, I'm sorry to say that, in the election challenge because of the judges. The federal judges are compromised and corrupt. They will not stand in the stead, and that goes for the Supreme Court as well. So we have to be prepared to wage a second American revolution, peaceful and legal, and the masses must rise up. So I want to turn it over to Ivan to tell us what happened, at least in the early days of solidarity in Poland, and when the people did rise up and there was apparently no violence. The government, of course, pushed back, the so-called government, the communist government. Ivan, you're a student of history. Tell us what happened in Poland, because Poland was the first country to break away from communism, at least we thought at the time, and the Soviet Union. And the Polish people were very brave. I might add, I'm a quarter Polish, so I take some credit. Okay, go on, Ivan.
Thank you, Larry, and pleasure to be with you on the show again. So yes, like you said, the initial plan of the solidarity movement in Poland was a non-violent revolt, a general strike, and it was supposed to lead to fair elections, where a new government was supposed to be put in place, not the communist government that existed. It wasn't officially communist; it was Polish, but everybody knew that it was communist. So this was the intention. U.S. as well was supporting Poland in their efforts during that time. But unfortunately, even though most people think that Poland is free today and we managed to get rid of communist regimes, it didn't actually happen, because what happened is these guys just went and became the Polish deep state that we have now. It's very deep. It's very, very deep. All the judges that we have now, they're new judges. None of the existing ones are from that era. And the ones that used to rule at the time, used to give rulings at the time during the communist era or post-communist up to 1980s, and none of them ever suffered any punishment. None of them went to prison. So they just, basically all the communists switched from uniforms to suits, and they moved from the communist era or post-communist before the 1980s to the new era, which they are still are in power today, without suffering any damages or any punishment for their crimes. So the concept is good, and I agree that the concept of peaceful revolution using the legal means that we have, you guys in the U.S. have much more of them, because you have the Constitution well written by God-fearing people, and like you say in U.S. that the reason why the Constitution is so thin is because the Bible is so thick. So you have the means. We, of course, we are the same people. We're all men. So we could have those means as well, but unfortunately, Poland has been also brainwashed by the globalist, Catholic Church from Rome, and we don't have the biblical foundation that people in the U.S. have. So it's a switch, it's a mental switch that has to happen here in Poland. That haven't happened on a global scale, on a major scale yet. But like I said, I support the idea of peaceful revolution, because if we look through history now, there was never a bloody revolution that brought it in itself, just a bloody revolution never brought on an actual change. The change has to happen within the minds of every person. They have to understand that there needs to be a solid foundation, and like you have the foundation of America, the Bible, and the Constitution that is derived from that, like I said, and that's the proper foundation that we should have in Poland. And that's what we're working on in Against the Light TV. We are biblical television, we're Christians, and we're sharing the message of the gospel. And that's how we're trying to renew the minds of people, because like the Bible says, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And that's what we strive for. But that didn't happen yet in Poland. We're hoping to someday in the future.
Well, it hasn't happened here yet either, but that's a good lesson, Ivan, because even when we reclaim this country, and we have to right now, because we're on the edge of going down for the count, finally, particularly with Biden. I predicted Biden, when he becomes president, won't last 6 months. He's got severe neurological problems. He's had several strokes, it's been reported. And of course, a la Hillary Clinton, Biden may not wake up one morning. And then we have people in charge of the extreme left, communists, socialists, radical Muslims, radicals on the Jewish left, radicals everywhere, taking control of this country and turning it into a Soviet-style gulag. Maybe not quite as bad, but almost. And then when we remove them, hopefully peacefully and legally, they'll seep back into the body politic through the deep state, which is there. And that's what I write about in my book. It takes a revolution, forget the scandal industry, and that's why we do need justice. And that's why, because we don't have judges that will mete out justice, our judges, as you know, Ivan, are bought and paid for, particularly on the federal bench. They get there on the basis of political campaign contributions. Money talks, nobody walks. They're obviously the disciples, the stooges, frankly, of those who put them in power. They're the yes men, like they were on the court of St. James under King George III in the days leading up to the revolution. And that was the basic reason for our revolution, was to take back our justice system. And that's where we are today. So yes, we have a big job ahead of us, and Poland does too, and other countries do as well. And the country needs to be educated in the ways of the Judeo-Christian ethic and the Father and His Son. That's true. We do. Right now, in this country, we've got radical...
Larry.
Yeah, go on. Go on.
I started reading the book, and I think anybody who really wants to understand the state of the U.S. Legal branch, the judiciary branch, I really recommend the book, because it's sort of like almost like an encyclopedia of the current corruption that is taking place. It's a great summary. I'm about midway through it. So I think what you mentioned there, the quotes from Jefferson, that if they're not going to be a proper, if we're not going to go through the process of this legal revolution, peaceful revolt through the courts and through the Constitution, then unfortunately we will end up with a bloody revolution, because either people are going to have enough, or somebody's just going to push the populace to a bloody revolution. So everybody who doesn't want a bloody revolution, I think you should use the tools, especially you in the U.S. You have so many tools that you can use: the Constitution and the way your legal system operates, and the separation of the powers. It doesn't work very well always, but you do have that. So I think people who don't want to end up in an actual revolution with people being shot and stuff, should use
yes, that's what we're trying to avoid. And we see that's what we're trying to avoid, Ivan. And just in the last few days, we see governors, in California and New York and elsewhere, Pennsylvania, taking complete control of the people, saying that they even have to wear masks in their own homes. I was somewhat joking earlier in the week, does that mean that we have to wear a mask when we have sex? I mean, no, it gets to the point of absurdity. And now there's curfews in California. They're taking dictatorial control of this country, and they're using COVID-19 as an excuse to do it, the left. Are they doing the same thing in Poland?
Yes, actually, we have similar things in Poland. Now Poland is one of the top 3 most, I guess you can say, infested or affected by this coronavirus countries in the world. Third to Italy, U.S. So we have quite bad. We heard from the Minister of Health today that we're going to have restrictions towards Christmas. On the holidays, we're only going to be able to have a close family, no friends, no relatives, remote relatives, only close family to celebrate Christmas. And so it's similar in terms of deaths. We have about 626 deaths today from COVID, and 626, right? So it's 12,700 people diagnosed. 22,000 and a half people diagnosed from COVID. So it's the same. But I want to add something. I want to add a perspective to this pandemic, right? Because what happened, and you talked about it on our television, Larry, first time you came on, the fact that there's it's quite plausible. It's quite possible that the intelligence agencies withdraw information from President Trump about this pandemic, which prevented him from reacting earlier and doing even more to stop this and cause him also to say some silly things. But look at what happened in Taiwan. Taiwan is a great example of a very disciplined populace that trust their government because they have a reason to trust them, because the government is honest and they're accountable. So when the government went out and said, look, this is a serious, it wasn't pandemic at that time, but it was a serious illness, a serious virus, everybody got in line. They started putting the masks on, and they started being very careful. And because of that, they're now functioning normally. They can have mass mass concerts, gatherings. They don't have, they have those restrictions, right? But they don't even have that many infections. Like, for example, 24 million people live in Taiwan.
Well, we're running out of time on this segment. I'm going to hold you over to the last segment, the verdict, for a couple of minutes, Ivan. But one thing I want to say before we go over to that last segment on the verdict is that they did that voluntarily. They weren't forced with police power to do it. And that's what we're going through in this country. And some of our sheriffs are refusing to enforce these orders, which is good. I'll be right back with the verdict on Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I'm back with the verdict. Fellow patriots, friends, supporters, people of faith, conservatives, libertarians, and everyone who isn't a radical socialist and communist. Let's put it that way. I'm with Ivan Belostenko from Against the Tide TV in Poland. We're using Poland as a good example of how things are in this country and how things can be, and what the risks are if we don't do it right in terms of waging a peaceful and legal revolution. But Ivan, here's the thing. You were just citing Taiwan. But what we have in this country right now are dictators, okay, who of the left, who think they can tell people what to do, where they go, whether they can stay out on the streets till 10 o'clock at night. They have no faith in the people doing the right thing. They think that they're smarter than everybody else. And of course, we have governors like Governor Andrew Cuomo in New York, who literally have killed thousands of elderly people with his orders, which allowed COVID-infected people into nursing homes. He will pay the price for that someday, legally. One of the problems in this country is that there is immunity for public officials. It's very difficult to break through it. And that's something that I want to change, is that when we do wage our peaceful revolution, we're going to remove the immunity for public officials, for judges and others. They need to be held accountable. And that's why in this country, I've advocated in the book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry, Citizens Grand Juries, that we will mete out the justice. The people will mete out justice. And we will do it fairly, and we'll do it in a way that actually works. But just want to get your final thoughts for about a minute, because I want to conclude this on another area as to where you think Poland is headed right now. Where will it wind up, given the fact that you have this deep state that seems to be intractable?
Well, if we don't succeed of getting rid of this deep state, we're going to end up where we were during the Second World War, or even before that, when we lost our country altogether. We're going to end up swallowed by Germany and probably Russia, or some sort of different mix of that kind of thing. So we're going to lose our independence basically. So that's in a nutshell. If it's either us or the deep state, really. So we have to get rid of it. And if we don't, we lose our independence.
And again, that's a good example for the United States, because if we don't shape up, we're going to be shipping out, and we'll be all under the domination of powers like communist China, for sure. And I still don't understand why our government, including President Trump, has not sought compensation for the huge damage that's being done to this country and to the world. And Ivan and I are going to be working on that issue in the near future, medium future, and distant future. We're going to be working together. Ivan, I want to thank you for coming on, Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. You're a very intelligent person, and you're the kind of person that will save not just Poland, but the world if people listen to what you have to say. Thank you, Ivan. God bless you. I want to conclude by pointing out what our Declaration of Independence said. Written by Thomas Jefferson, edited by Benjamin Franklin and others, obviously John Adams, the other founding fathers. It starts off by saying that when the bonds of government are broken, the people have a God-given right, if not duty, to abolish that government and to form a new government by and for the people with certain inalienable rights. And that's what we've got to do now. We've got to do it peacefully and legally. And that's why I brought Ivan on, because you see, that's what they attempted to do in Poland. They didn't succeed. But we in this country need to succeed for the benefit, not just of ourselves, but for other countries like Poland, because we are the beacon of the world. And so goes the United States, so goes the rest of the Western world and the world in general. And that's the responsibility that we have. And that's why I do want you to go out and purchase my book at Amazon.com. It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. And I want you to read the Declaration of Independence before you read that, because we are at the very end. And despite the fact that there are those out there trying to sell a bill of goods right now, that somehow the president's going to be bailed out by the courts. Yes, there was massive fraud, but the courts are not going to do it. So it's not just up to ourselves, but it's up to God. He will shepherd us through this. And we, the people, must now rise up and take our country back before the Joe Bidens, the Kamala Harrises, the Ilham Omars, the Rashida Tlaibs, the Bernie Sanders, the rest of them completely destroy this country. And we're on the verge of it. Thank you for listening to me. I'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Until then, God bless you. God is with us. Remember that. And thank you for listening to me.
Llegó Black Friday a JCPenney con miles de ofertas este fin de semana en la tienda y jcp.com, como selección de joyería con diamante de 1/10 de quilate a $19.99. Y ahorra 40% en selección de Levi's para él y ella. O ahorra 30% extra por toda la tienda con tu cupón. Y aprovecha entrega a tu auto. Es rápido y gratis. Juntos en celebración y paz. JCPenney. Ofertas válidas del 20 al 22 de noviembre. Aplican condiciones y exclusiones. Levi's y la joyería se excluyen de las ofertas y cupones. Detalles en la tienda o jcp.com. En la tienda o jcp.com. En la tienda o jcp.com. En la tienda o